and welcome to another episode. I'm Christine, your pediatric feeding expert. If you're new here, I am here to give you information that is going to actually work with your kids. Tools, strategies, mindset shifts, whatever it takes to turn things around for good, right? So this is where people come when nobody else can figure out why their kids are not eating, right? We usually get the most severe of the severe cases, but that's because I think, if I'm going to be real, what most people are doing to help picky eaters, it's not working, because sometimes they're not picky eaters, sometimes they're not ARFID, right? And I'm not really here to sugarcoat anything. So if you are tired of feeling stuck and second guessing literally everything you're doing, go take my free quiz at thepickyeaterstest.com. And in less than 2 minutes, I'll tell you exactly where they are on their eating journey and the next best step to take. But let's dive into today's topic. And this is for the parents with the extremely limited eaters, okay? Under 5 foods, that is very, very restricted, right? And I want to maybe tell you like a background, kind of like a little story here, because I've heard from many parents that it's really just this very overwhelming, isolating type of a feeling. Like being at a birthday party can be very triggering, actually more for the parents than it is for the kids sometimes. I don't know if this is you. Please, share and tell me. I'd love to know. But I do hear this story like recurring again and again about birthday parties. Like other kids are laughing, they're eating cake and their ice cream and they're eating pizza and they're licking frosting off their hands. And then you like look over at your child and you like give them their like safe backup meal, because it's like the only thing that they're going to eat. And, like you might hear other kids like asking like, well, why are they eating something different? Why won't they eat what we're eating? And you're just like, give like the polite nod and the smile, right? But inside you're like dying. You're like, oh my God, why can't they just be like the other kids and eat the other foods? Like these are foods that all the kids should like. I think that's what it is about the birthday parties, now that I say it out loud, because I think it's that everyone assumes that kids love pizza and ice cream, which is like usually what's served at a birthday party, right? So when you see your kids doing something that you feel like all of the other kids in the world love, it's like, well, why is my child so different? Why don't they like it? I don't get it. And you can't relate because you probably like those foods. So to you, they taste good. They're safe foods and you're just like confused, and it could be upsetting, I think, right? So, and then you're like, sometimes I hear like the parents tell me like, and then I'm like standing there and there's all the other parents there. And I'm like wondering if they're talking about me or judging me because I brought them their safe food. And I just like wonder, like, was I doing the right thing by bringing the food? So there's like all of these like extraneous emotions and feelings that come up with something such as mundane as just attending a child's birthday party. So if this is your child and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly like me and our situation, keep listening, because that is what we're talking about today, right? So let's start with why this can even happen, right? So by the time you get to this extreme point of only 5 foods, it's not like, and I'll tell you, if it's happened mostly overnight, it is probably in the ARFID category. If this has slowly progressed over time, it's probably more in the pediatric feeding disorder category. Doesn't matter the name. I just like to make a little distinction, because a lot of parents get fixated on this ARFID word and they actually end up getting the wrong type of help because of that label. So that's the only reason I even care about the label at all. The label to me does not matter. We treat the symptoms. we work on. Either way, there's a problem with mindset. So we're still actually sort of working on the exact same goals. There might be some differences a little bit in how we're treating, but very important to really like we want to rule out ARFID because there was just some things that you don't need to worry about or focus on if it is ARFID. But the mindset piece is still very much the same and very much there. Okay. So why can this happen to your kids? Like, how did you get here to 5 foods? And I do personally ask this question to myself when I see, you know, the profile of the kids come across my desk. Like, I know every person that calls, every person that books in for an evaluation with us. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've seen kids with less than 5 foods. And I always, my first, like, almost like a reflexive, how did we get to only 5 foods? Like, where was the breakdown? Like, when it was 10 foods, like, what were we doing to work on this, you know? Because we got here somehow. But what's really common is that there's a few areas, right? We always, if you're new here, you probably haven't heard me talk about the 4 pillars of feeding, but these are the 4 areas I have identified as being the reasons that kids will not eat food, right? So first one we'll talk about is sensory processing. Sure, it could be a sensory processing issue, disorder, however you want to call it. Or everybody's profile of sensory is a little bit different, right? Some people are more sensitive to certain smells or certain tastes or textures, right? So we look at, what is your child's profile? Like, what are they oversensitive to? What are they undersensitive to? Because that will tell a story and help us hone in on exactly what we're going to work on, in what order we're going to work on, and why are the sensory areas like kind of, I don't know, spiking? Like, why are they very sensitive? So a lot of times that's like dysregulation in the body, and how can we help them regulate better so they're not so oversensitive to those different stimuli, right? So sensory, a big reason. Okay. Number 2, oral motor challenges, very often overlooked. If you have an ARFID diagnosis and no one has looked in the mouth, then I would very much question that diagnosis, because I always look at that as one of the first things. Can they safely eat the foods you're asking them to eat? And you might think, of course, I've seen them chew. They can chew, you know, their cookies just fine. They can chew their puffs just fine. But as an expert in oral motor who has taken many classes in this, I will tell you that there are certain foods that are much easier to eat and other foods that require much more muscle, coordination, and endurance. So can they actually eat the foods you're asking them to eat safely? And whether it's the chicken or the egg here, we don't always know. Is it because they've been eating these easy to process, literally processed foods? Usually our picky eaters are 99% of the time eating processed foods. Are they eating those because they lacked the skill? Or is it because maybe a preference in sensory, they gravitated towards those easier to mash or eat foods, and now their muscles have atrophied or shrunk, which does absolutely happen. Muscles, if you don't use it, you lose it. Any muscle in your body is about the same, right? Ask any bodybuilder what will happen if they just stop cold working out for a month or 2, right? They're very concerned about muscle atrophy, and the muscles in your mouth are no different than the other parts of your body. They're a little bit smaller, but they still require regular use to maintain, you know, their strength and their level of endurance, right? So we don't know chicken or the egg, but I can tell you that a lot of our picky eaters often always have very weak oral musculature, right? So we had sensory processing, oral motor challenges. Next, gut and medical issues, right? Things like reflux, constipation, food intolerances, food sensitivities. These things have to be looked at and ruled out, because none of the work we're going to do is going to make a big difference if the gut is uncomfortable. If there is, and leaky gut is an extremely common condition for everybody, right? It's because, at least in America, because of our food supply, because it's been sprayed with pesticides. I could go into that for hours and hours. It was actually my first passion before getting into feeding therapy. I just had like a love of learning about nutrition and the body and what food does to the body and things like that, which maybe made me a great candidate to be a feeding therapist. I can only assume, I don't know. But those things might be affecting how they're eating. If they're feeling hungry, if they're, refusing certain categories of foods, and if they're craving certain foods, right? Sometimes our body actually craves things that are hurting us, which is like a little counterintuitive. But I've had many times people say like, oh, I ended up having a celiac diagnosis, but that's all I wanted to eat. Right? So it does happen strangely like that sometimes. So looking at their history, we work with a functional nutritionist, making sure we get some gut and stool testing in anyone we have any red flags of suspecting any of these types of issues, right? Because we want to rule them out. And it's a very big part of the success of, well, really, whether you're going to see success or not. Right. And the last pillar is our mindset, right? That anxiety and fear around new foods. However, that mindset and that fear of new foods, or fear of foods in general, stems from those three areas, right? The sensory, the oral motor, the gut. And when you can have like a little bit of a storm here where these things are overlapping. Right. So a lot of times there's some oral motor challenges and some sensory. Sometimes there's all of them, right? Sometimes there's gut issues, oral motor challenges, sensory processing issues, which have led to lots of anxiety and fear. So we have to maybe be addressing all of them at once, right? So if your child has less than 5 foods, these are usually the reasons why, right? Now, again, like I said, ARFID is like its own special category here. And ARFID would really just be that anxiety and fear piece that has cropped up in the middle of nowhere where there was no issues previously. And all of a sudden they've dropped. And now they only have a handful of foods. And it was like last week they ate whatever, this week they won't eat anything. And yes, that could be a gut issue, or it could be anxiety and fear caused by like a traumatic event, right? Something might have happened, like a choking incident, or, maybe they witnessed someone having some sort of a choking incident and it was enough to make them want to stop eating. Or so that's just a little bit of that distinction. But the big piece of this here is if your child only is eating 5 foods, the likelihood of this being about them being stubborn or they're badly behaved or defiant, it's probably not true, right? It's probably some of these other issues that I've just talked about working together behind the scenes. And what you see is the outcome, that is that behavior piece, but that's not the cause of it, okay? So let's get into what this means, right? Your kid has only 5 foods. Now you know maybe why. You have like some thoughts about why. So what does it mean for you, for your kid? I would say for me, one of the biggest problems is nutrient deficiency. Okay. If you're eating 5 foods and they're the same 5 foods every day, or even less than that, or even if it's a little bit more than that, right? We really should be eating a wide variety of foods across different food categories to have a healthy gut microbiome. You can't have a healthy gut microbiome if you only have the same few foods every day. And usually those are processed foods. We're not even talking about fresh foods usually. We're not talking about kids that have 5 foods are usually not eating fresh fruits and vegetables as part of that 5. It's usually processed foods, which is only compounding the problem with the gut, right? So not only then is there nutritional deficiencies, but the gut is not getting that proper balance of bacteria, the good bacteria that it needs to do things like fight off infections and, help you focus and, release the appropriate hormones. It just throws everything off, right? So they might be very moody. Socially, I'd say there's a social impact, right? We talked about the birthday party thing, but it does go beyond that. Things like going to school, going to vacation, friends' houses, play dates, parties, not just birthday parties, but family parties, right? There is that social impact. And then there's the daily stress on top of the families, right? So kids that are only eating 5 foods, that puts a lot of stress on the parents. How do we go out? How do we live working around this strange problem of them only eating a couple of different foods, right? So this means when you have only 5 foods that it is not normal picky eating. That's a normal picky eater will absolutely have more than 5 foods. Picky eating is a developmental period of time. It's a short window of time. Doesn't extend for years upon years. Okay. It doesn't impact growth, nutrition, daily life like this. Okay. When it's become this bigger problem, it's not picky eating anymore. And it means that it needs attention from a professional usually. Because honestly, if I'm being perfectly honest, if you were going to get them to eat, you would have done it by now. So yeah, we need to go to the next step. We need to go to the next level and get some professional help. But this, I think, is the big problem is the parents don't know where to go for help. A lot of times they will go to their pediatrician, which is like the obvious first line of defense here of, hey, something's different about my kid, help me out. The problem is that there's a lot of pediatricians that don't believe in feeding therapy, don't know anything about feeding therapy, have actually all pediatricians, unless they have on their own taken courses, they don't have any training in child nutrition. So there's a few issues with consulting your pediatrician. And I'm not saying all pediatricians are like this, but we actually try to work with pediatricians. We want to work with them. We want to educate them because you can't learn everything in med school, and I'm not blaming them. But this is really, really important. And a lot of pediatricians dismiss it. They make parents feel badly, like you're not trying hard enough, or you're being too relaxed. You have to be stricter, or just, starve them. They'll eat eventually. Or what else have I heard? Well, they'll outgrow it, or don't worry about it. They're on their growth curve. Don't worry about it. They're gaining weight. But again, if you don't know anything about nutrition, gaining weight, eating, breads and cookies is not healthy. So that's not good. I actually, if I'm being honest, we had a parent tell us, please do not reach out to my pediatrician. And we were like, but why? Like, we want to teach them. We want to share progress. We want to share what we've been working on and, show them that, we are making some progress here. We are being effective. We like to touch base if, we do find those gut issues. just things like that. We like to be collaborative. And I think it's super important. And she said, no, he doesn't believe in this and he's just going to get angry. So please do not reach out to them. And they wouldn't give us his contact information. And I was so taken aback by that. Well, because one, if you really are in such a disagreement, I feel like you might just need a different doctor. Like they might not be the person for you. But then also I was taken aback by like, if that is true, I don't know, right? This is her mom's perception. We might have reached out and they might have been perfectly lovely and accepting and happy to hear about the progress. But if that is true, I was just thinking like, what kind of a doctor would actually do that? That was so mind-blowing to me. Anyway, so this means that we need to do something further, right? So let me give you some things that you can do right now. Some practical tips. Of course, if you are in this boat, please go to thepickeaterstest.com. You will I can probably guess where you will fall or where your child's level will be, but it will give you the next step. Working with us and getting the next step is going to be so key in what happens in the next 6 to 12 months from now with your kids eating. But I want to give you some practical tools that you can use starting today. But again, without knowing your child's profile, without getting that full picture of who they are, how they came to this point of 5 foods, it's all going to be somewhat surface level advice. And that's the problem with asking people for advice on Facebook, looking at Instagram tips. Of course, we love to share knowledge. I love to give tips. We give tips on the podcast. But again, everything is going to be very surface level if we don't have any personal information about your child, right? But things that are very general that you could definitely start with today. Number 1 is always taking off the pressure. That is always, always, always number 1 thing you could just stop doing. So stop telling them to take another bite. Stop telling them, that they're, that you'd love it if they just tried it once, just to take a lick, all of the putting the pressure on it. If they do try something, asking them how they liked it. Did you like it? That's all forms of pressure. Just don't talk about it. Just take all that pressure off of them. And we teach you how to do that. And it's harder than you think because it's something you're so used to saying and doing. And you're always on guard at mealtime. So we do teach you how to not be so on guard and how to be more relaxed about it, because it is something you honestly have to learn to do. Or it's almost more of like an unlearning of things in a way as well. You can do non-food exposure activities, looking, touching, smelling, right? You're probably not going to get to tasting at this point yet. Again, not even having the expectation that they're going to taste it, but just doing some like general type of food play would be good. Meal prep in the kitchen could be helpful. Even just setting up consistent routines around food. If you haven't before, routines could be, we're going to eat from this time to this time, and that's going to be it until the next meal. So not allowing them to graze all day long is another tip. How we introduce foods to kids at this level really is going to vary. So I'm almost hesitant to recommend exposing to new foods right away. But it is something that it might not hurt to do, right? If it's something that you haven't done, it's something we could try out. But I will tell you that it really does depend on the kids, right? Because some kids will see a new food on their plate and gag and throw up. Others will cry. Others will throw it. Others will do nothing. They'll just ignore it, or they'll just ignore you. So it really depends on your child's personality, their profile, their history. So these are all things we take into account. So again, focus on things like taking off the pressure, non-food exposure activities like playing, meal prep, not pushing them to taste or lick, keeping it a little bit lower, and just making it a positive experience. So there shouldn't be yelling, pressure, bribing associated with any of those types of activities. And of course, most important is getting that next level of help, right? So of course, that would be someone like us. It doesn't have to be me specifically, but it does have to be somebody with a lot of training in all of those areas that we talked about. We have to rule out the gut stuff. We have to know about sensory. We have to know about oral motor. We have to know about how to shift mindset. All of those things are going to be very, very important in finding the right person to deal with this level of food refusal. Okay. So remember, kids at this level, it's going to be a journey. You're not going to sprint. I've had parents call up it's the beginning of summer where I am right now in the world. And I've had parents call and say, we've had this food problem going on a very long time, and I want to start the new school year with a clean slate, and I want them to be able to take food, and we want to squash this problem by the time September comes around. And I'm like, okay, but they only have 7 foods, and you're giving me like barely 10 weeks to do that, and it's just that's probably not going to happen, because you're undoing a lot and then you're building. So it's like you have to tear down the house first and then rebuild from the foundation. And depending on how dedicated the parent is in their time and presence, and how motivated the child is, their age, how long the problem has been going on, what types of foods they are eating and are able to eat, that will all determine the time frame. But I can promise you that the less foods you have, the longer it will take to fix. The more time that has passed that this has been a problem, the longer it will take to fix. So those have been 100% indicators every time. I can always guarantee someone in this category is probably going to take a year about to fix. Now, in other categories, right, so we have different levels of your child's eating. Other categories, we've had kids in the stuck category and the curious category that can make progress significantly faster. But the fearful category specifically does take a longer time. So that's why we always say, let's try to work on this before it becomes a worse problem, because it's only going to be harder to fix and take more time. It's much easier to fix when it's not as severe an issue. So I always encourage early intervention with this is always best. The worst that can happen is we can say, you know what, they're not that severe. These are some tips. Let's monitor, let's make sure it doesn't get any worse. But here's what we can do. Here's how we can maintain and grow from here, versus waiting and hoping. And then you just see the food list going down and down and down. And, I just you can't change someone that quickly when they're at that level. There's been attempts through behavioral programs and hospital clinics to do just that. And we've had many people come because that had backfired, because it was purely based on compliance and behavior. And that child had a very strong will, and it wasn't working for them. And they didn't care what the motivation was. They were not eating. And in many ways, it made it worse, because then they just didn't trust the people, the caregivers or whomever. So sometimes they ended up with less foods, or in the best case scenario, they ended up exactly where they were. In the worst case scenario, they end up worse off, like with less foods. So again, early is best. Progress is absolutely possible in every case. We've had cases where kids only eat one thing when they come to us. Every single child that has stuck with it has made progress and come back and made leaps and bounds. But it will happen in small steps. It happens with consistency, and it has to happen with parent involvement. That is pretty much non-negotiable, right? It is a journey. That's what we tell you, because we don't want you to think that if you come into our program, we will fix it up, lickety split, you'll be on your way in 2 months. That's probably not going to happen, but I can promise you that if you stick with it, you're consistent, you make small baby steps, even every day, just one small thing, you will absolutely see transformative progress. No doubt. There's no doubt in my mind on that one. So I want to thank you for listening. If this is you, please know that there is so much hope. We do see success with this. You can turn this around, but it is going to take a commitment upon your part, some dedication of time and resources, but it is absolutely possible to fix. We do it every day. So we hope to see you on the inside. Remember to go take our quiz at thepickyEatersTest.com, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.